Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
Post-pod.
Post-pod was... Go. Oh, there you go. Come on, guy.
There's all that alliteration of the P's. It was really... It just set off my lungs. Oh. Yeah. What'd you think, V?
Well, it was an absolute treat to be able to welcome Professor Sharp to the podcast. I mean, we've been around the literature for so long. We've had the opportunity to invite so many of our guests that have come from the Ehrenberg-Bass Institute. Jenny Romanek, Dr. Ella Ward. We had Dr. Ari Danusanaga.
I totally forgot about Ari. Yeah, that was a great chat with him. Yeah.
Yeah, John, Professor Dawes. Like the list is Dr. Nicole Hartnett. Like. So to have Professor Sharp here with us, I think was great. And I think as we want to ring in this new year and kind of level set on, on some of those like laws of marketing, but treating them as resolutions, I think it's a great way to kick things off. What did you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's so many, like it was, I've tried to learn these laws as much as I can. And then to Byron's point earlier, like in the moment, I'm trying to repeat back the laws and I'm butchering the language. I'm like, yeah, fuck. I know this stuff, but why can't I get the words out? So it's funny when you think about it. And then like the amount of time, this is one of the things I think is interesting about the live that they do for executives.
Right.
It's being able to talk to people about these things is really helpful because there's a lot. It's dense information in the books, and really internalize it and be able to put it in the language is really helpful. And I agree. I think putting it in terms of like, here's some resolutions on how to rethink things eliminates a little bit of the language barrier.
Yeah.
And just makes you think a little bit differently about how I am more automated in some of the things that I do in my marketing.
When you could be using that to say, here's where I want to start pushing back a little bit. So like in the way I read or see this, for me, it's like, it becomes really tangible. Like if we just use an example is, I will acknowledge that there isn't really a consumer purchase funnel. It's a model, but that takes you back and say, well, what does really matter is mental and physical availability. Okay. Check. How am I measuring mental availability? Here's how I'm going to measure it. Bang, bang, bang. Physical availability. Here's how I'm going to measure it. What else do you need?
Yeah. There's the one thing that he talked about a little bit as well was Professor Sharp, was the idea of like measuring things in the real world.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate as an underpinning of a lot of their work, because that's, I think, ultimately what they've tried to do, and I think have been really successful at, is set up frameworks, ideas, explain laws, and then showcase them in a way that you can actually measure them. And so that's the idea of mental and physical availability. You can measure mental availability and replace the idea of top of funnel.
Yeah.
With that concept, I think is super interesting. And then the language matters too, because I think it does matter when you're talking to a CFO, let's say, having them say top of funnel brand awareness, like it's a little bit, I think because it's been around so long, that language kind of makes a little bit of sense. But then if you say we have to build mental availability, meaning there's a lot of people that don't know anything about us, and like that becomes a very real kind of conversation.
Totally. Because when you think about our funnel, we talk about awareness, consideration, conversion, typically, right? If you use the three major groups. But technically, consideration is still helping with mental availability. What changes is your targeting, right? You're going to probably target those that have shown some level of intent in your product or service. So when you take it back and say, well, let's measure mental availability and in its entirety, all of a sudden you can start lumping a lot of these tactics together, because that's what they're doing. Some are more short term, some are a little bit more longer term, but it's all in this umbrella, if you want to call it, mental availability. Which I think, again, we we overcomplicate it at times as marketers because we're trying to justify everything through these different layers and showcase the importance when in fact you're solving for two problems. That's it.
Yeah, and it kind of to tie into one of the other things we talked about, and one of the other resolutions is around the idea of hyper targeting and segmentation, and then the counterpoint around sophisticated mass marketing. I think it's interesting because again, there's so many words that have so much meaning built into them. Like you hear mass marketing, you think national TV campaigns, right? Like that's a thing that I think a lot of us would just naturally make a leap to.
Yeah.
But that's not what sophisticated mass marketing means. And I think it's an interesting and important kind of point to take, which is to say, like on the mental availability side, it is about reaching all the people in your category that you can reach and not segmenting that out into like arbitrary ways that actually don't have a difference in terms of who buys, who doesn't buy.
Right.
Because you can because there's so much data and so many ways to slice the data through third-party cookies or third-party data or first-party data and consumer behavior, contextual targeting. Like you can make up so many things about why it's so much better to do like niche one-to-one, infinite number of ways to target it and segment the market and look for those differences because there's all kinds of data so you can find all the differences instead of stepping back and go, actually, it's best if we just reach everybody in the category.
Exactly. No, exactly. I wonder if it'd be helpful for our listeners because I know the way we wanted to attempt to go through these resolutions. I know some of them kind of tied in together and we were kind of like over time, but how about we just quickly list off I think we had 8?
Yeah. There's a bonus one at the end.
Right.
Which I don't think we got to, but kind of did a little bit.
So let's list them off so then everyone has them kind of like consolidated in one space. So the first one was, I will revisit my beliefs on loyalty as a repeat purchase behavior.
Yep.
Resolution number 2 was, I will review the evidence on customer acquisition versus brand loyalty as the path to growth.
Yep.
Resolution number 3 was, I will reconsider how and why I segment the market the way I do. Resolution number 4 is, I will take another look at my obsession with hyper-targeting, timing the market, and mass personalization. Number 5 was, from the you are what you eat category, I will reassess the metrics I use to measure and track performance. Number 6, I will measure the strength of my brand's assets before rebranding. Number 7, I will acknowledge that there isn't really a consumer purchase funnel, it's just a model. And the bonus resolution, I will spend more time learning about finance's perspective on growth. I think we could all write these down and have them as a Post-its on our screens, on our walls, where we can take it and just push our teams, push our leadership peers, anything to kind of get alignment there and really start having really, really deep conversations around some of these areas.
Yeah, the bonus resolution number 8, where I will spend more time learning about finance perspective on growth. There was an example recently that came out of, ironically, the Cannes Festival of Creativity last year.
Okay.
Where the CFO, not CMO, CFO, is a guy named Ian Borden, who was on stage at this Festival of Creativity talking about how marketing was one of the most important growth investments that they make at McDonald's. CFO saying that.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating for a whole bunch of reasons. But I think that's part of the objective of all of this is to get to a point where, like we always joke, the marketing team or the marketing department's the coloring team.
Yeah.
And so I think if we're trying to get from coloring department to strategic business partner, like having a CFO say that is one of those things you go, if we can get our CFO to say that's a really big step towards winning.
100%.
And I think a lot of these resolutions and a lot of the work that Ehrenberg-Bass Institute has done is getting us further in that direction.
I agree.
of winning by just looking at the weird things that happen in the real world.
I agree. And like he started off the podcast where he said, when we asked him, what did you identify something in the market that, really allowed you to lean into this? And he said, a healthy disrespect for what has become norm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that intuitively, when you think about it, it's almost like everyone has the license to question, and we should, apply your critical thinking abilities. Like, if it doesn't make sense, ask why it doesn't make sense. Don't just take it as the way things operate or the way things work. And I think that sometimes we just, well, if Mark's saying it, or if V's saying it, or Sandy or whoever, it's like, oh, it must be true. It's like, well, it could be our truth or what we've seen, but it doesn't mean it's the truth.
Yeah.
Even though you and I only speak in truth, so I mean, I don't know, it doesn't really apply to us.
We're only honest
all the time.
I've never lied in my life.
Ever.
Yeah, and there's things that I think are interesting also about, these truths that like, and I've done this in the past, and I'm sure you've probably tried doing some of these things, but like as an example, NPS, customer satisfaction scores, you can run this kind of analysis in your own category. Like, more than likely, or pick a category that's really big, popular, whatever you want, and then look at the customer satisfaction scores. Then graph that on a secondary axis against their revenue. And like, it's crazy, because you're going to end up seeing a graph that looks like revenue in a long tail, like a big company to a small company. And then customer satisfaction scores are flat for the most part across the board. Right. And yet we obsess about customer satisfaction scores so much.
Yeah.
So like, I think a lot of us can kind of start looking at some of these things for ourselves and see if it, like, some of these laws that we think might be so different, whether they apply in our categories or not.
I have a question for you, because this happened to me a couple of weeks ago.
No.
Oh, no. When some of these, you brought up with Professor Sharp, you brought up the notion, it costs more to retain a customer. Sorry, it costs less to retain a customer than it is to acquire a new one. Mm-hmm. And I actually heard it in my circles here in the last couple of weeks. And I didn't have the energy to be like, you know what, that's bullshit. And I just let it go, because I'm like, I'm not getting into this right now. So I'm curious, like, have you experienced the same thing where you're kind of picking your battles a little bit? And anyways, I don't know. It was just one of those moments. I'm like, I could really come in on this right now and make them feel that what they're saying is not true, but what is it actually going to help me achieve? And I just let it go.
Yeah. Well,
I let it go.
I know that's happened to me. Same thing, where I was just like, it's not a hill to die on today. I think you got to pick those kind of battles. But the other one, as you asked the question, I was reflecting when I first started working, I was in sales. Yeah. And I had, quick story, because this is how I think about this. I had just spent 3 weeks in as a pharma sales rep. I was just spent 3 weeks in an intensive, like, whatever it was, 10 hours a day, learning about everything about the product monograph, how the molecules work, doing all this kind of interaction, like sales training on like role playing for objection handling, all kinds of stuff, right? Learning how to speak the language, the words, all those kinds of things. So I get into the field for the first day, and I'm out with my manager doing a ride along. And so we get into this doctor's office, and the doctor's busy. We had been waiting for whatever it was. Sometimes I had to wait like 2 or 3 hours to see a physician.
Wow.
Yeah. And so we're sitting in the waiting room forever, waiting to get in to see this guy or girl. I can't remember what it was. Physician anyway. And so finally get in, and the doctor's clearly busy. And then I start in on, well, let me tell you about everything I learned. And eventually my manager like kind of kicks my leg. He's like, I think what Mark's trying to say is blah, blah, and ends it in like 2 seconds. And then we get outside and he's like, what did you think about that? I'm like, wow, I kind of didn't quite get it all. And you know, like, and I started rambling a little bit and blah, 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 this and that. He's like, yeah, okay, think about it this way. All the things that you learn is the whole story. You don't have time to tell the whole story in a 2-minute call. And you're going to end up pissing off a lot of people. So all I need you to do is to like recite a small paragraph. Sometimes it's just a few words. On occasion, you might get a chapter in.
Yeah.
Over time, you can tell them the whole story.
Yeah.
But you can't do it all at once.
Yeah.
And I was like, right. Okay, I'll try that. And so being a bit more aware of like the situation and like how, you know, busy the physician was and like what really mattered in that moment, all those kinds of things became part of like the way I started thinking about how to do this. Not just me, everybody that goes through that training. But I think about that a lot when I think about what kind of question you asked.
Yeah.
Because, there's so many misconceptions and misbeliefs that you'd end up just like pissing off a whole bunch of people if you try to tackle them all at once.
Yeah.
Unless it's in a presentation format where like that's the idea is you're trying to.
Yeah, that'd be different.
Yeah. But in a regular day-to-day conversation, sometimes, it's not worth it.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. But I thought of you. I thought about the research, like all the conversations that we've had, and I'm just like, I don't know if Mark would be proud in this moment or upset.
Well, another one that as a way that I have handled that too in the past is again same company there's a wicked smart guy. I think I've talked to him about this. Everyone thought of him as being the smartest guy in the company, and he was. But one of the things he said the most was a question, which was somebody would say something. He's like, "Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that."
Yeah.
Oh, tell me more about that. Oh, how do you mean?
Yeah.
And so, like, without having to rebuttal something, just asking somebody to explain how they got to that point, oftentimes they can explain it, and then they start to question whether or not they actually know.
Which then becomes a golden opportunity to step in.
Yeah. And then you can leave it as like, well, maybe we should talk more about that later. But
yeah. Is there anything else that stood out for you in our conversation with Professor Sharp?
I mean, there's lots of things that I know when I'm listening back to this, I'm going to like, oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. I would say like, there's just, the rebranding thing. I know like it happens so often. And I think knowing what's doing the branding job before you make changes is so critical. And but I think it's also so rare.
Yeah.
That people actually go and take a step back and go, okay, well, actually, what is driving all this? Like, what is the thing that people remember? Instead, I think a lot of times what people do, and I've done this too, just change stuff because I want it to be new or flashy or different or modern, whatever the thing is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the easiest, like it's, yeah. So just quickly on that though, like I think as marketers, it is the easiest thing that we can do to showcase evolution or progress. When you're doing a rebrand, oh, look at all the money that went into the rebrand, new logos, packaging, and all the rest of it. It's like, oh, they're working. Sometimes in absence of something like that, where you're just trying to maintain status quo, then there could be questions around like, what are you actually helping us do? Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. For me, the one thing again that stood out was just around, marketers like to think that they know the consumer, but how active are you actually out there understanding and listening to the consumer? And I know we always say marketing should be the one that has the closest to the consumer or be the consumer voice internally, but how often is that actually happening? And I think it's just it's a byproduct that, I don't think it's a byproduct of anything. It's just us not investing more time in those forums that could probably help answer a lot of the different business anomalies that we see, versus us burying ourselves in the data and saying, well, maybe it was this tactic or this audience targeting strategy that didn't allow us to drive that kind of growth in that moment. Wait, but here the CTRs on this side actually looked good. It's like based on what, right? Like we go down all these like rabbit holes when we're trying to be dead but it's like, why don't we just ask the people, ask the consumers?
Yeah.
We'd probably get more intel from that side.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, even just if you didn't ask customers and just understood these laws better, that's a good way of understanding consumer behavior because they've held up for so long. Like,
that's true.
And then looking for anomalies off of that rather than just looking for anomalies, because you'll always find them.
Oh, you can find anomalies everywhere.
Yeah.
If you're looking for an anomaly, you're going to find an anomaly.
Yeah. And by anomaly, I think something I want to find. Like,
what am I looking for?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I found it.
Go figure. So good.
Anyways.
Well, excuse me. Yeah, that was such an interesting conversation.
Yeah,
great way to start the new year.
That's what I was just gonna say. What a great way to start the new year. So everyone, write those resolutions down. Make them LinkedIn posts. Tag us. We'll share them. How you're gonna activate against it. Actually, we should actually try to do something. Yeah, I think there's something there.
Yeah. Let's rebrand and we'll make this. We'll make this resolution as part of our new brand.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something there.
I think there's something there, actually. If I'm being honest, I think there's something there that we can get people to explore with us as well. But anyways, Professor Sharp, if you're listening to the Postbot, thanks once again for coming on and sharing your insights with us. We genuinely appreciate it. And Mark, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. I'm going to go look for some profitability in the medicine cabinet.
I don't know if you'll find it there. I don't know.
I might find something. I'm hoping I find something. I just got a sudden cough attack.
All right, buddy. Sounds good. Oh, poor guy's coughing up a lung again.
I'm back. Just kidding.
Right. Barely. All right.
All right, man. We'll see you soon.
Have a great rest of your night.
You too. Bye.
Bye.